The Friday Sports Riot on SportsTownChicago.com.
What's up? This is the Friday Sports Riot on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Hoppy.
And I'm Ryan Stuppridge.
Call the show 630-403-5200. That is 630-403-5200. And let's get the show going. On the phone line from 87.7 The Game and Yahoo Sports Radio, Jason Goch is on the Friday Sports Riot on SportsTownChicago.com. What's up, Jason?
How you fellas doing? Good to be with you.
We are doing good. How has everything been since we last had you on the show?
Oh, other than the weather in Chicago, I can't complain about a thing. But if you gave me about 4 hours, I'd probably complain about the weather, but that's no fun.
Yeah, and let's start off by talking about the Bulls. What was like the main thing that went wrong for them as they lost to the Wizards in that Game 5?
They can't score. I mean, the Bulls just don't have enough scoring on that roster, and I hear people criticize Tom Thibodeau and say he pushes these guys too hard during the regular season, and maybe they were just tired. No, that's nonsense. What this comes down to is the NBA, there's two seasons. You have the regular season where not every team plays hard, but the Bulls do, and a few teams do. But the Bulls will beat a lot of teams in the regular season that are maybe a little better than them or right around the same level because Tom Thibodeau gets those guys to play hard. But in the playoffs, everybody plays hard. So that's kind of thrown out the water as far as the hustle stuff. It comes down to being able to put the ball in the basket. You look at the guys they run out there without Derrick Rose, they do not have enough scoring. Everybody loves Joakim Noah. He's not a scorer. Everybody loves Taj Gibson. Another good player, but he's not a scorer. I mean, Kirk Heinrich is on the downside. They do not have enough scoring on that roster, and that's simply why they didn't win that series. That's what it comes down to for me.
What is your take on the play of such Wizards as John Wall, Nene, and Bradley Beal, as they showed why you need top players to win playoff series? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, John Wall's a superstar in the making, or a superstar, sure. I mean, Bradley Beal's an emerging player, and they can score the ball when they need to. I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's what you need in the NBA. You look at the history of the NBA, I mean, teams that win the championships. I mean, Shaq and Kobe and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, I mean, and Michael Jordan. I mean, you guys know it. I mean, even the Spurs. I mean, Tim Duncan. You look at Tony Parker. You look at Manu Ginobili. They are guys who can do it in crunch time. And, you know, that's why I've been beating this drum for a long time now, and I don't know if he'll be available. But if he is, I hear people say, oh, you know, Carmelo Anthony might not be a good fit. But you know what? You have to try something. The window's only so big. And with Derrick Rose coming back next year, if you can somehow find a way to lure Carmelo Anthony here, and it means amnesty Carlos Boozer, it means get rid of Mike Dunleavy Jr., and it means get rid of Taj Gibson, do it.
Yes.
Taj Gibson is a nice player, but he's not Carmelo Anthony. Mike Dunleavy Jr. is a guy you can find for a mid-level exemption, and they don't want Carlos Boozer anyway. So I really think, I don't know if he'll be available. I don't know if they'd be able to work it out, but if that opportunity presents itself and the Bulls do not get Carmelo Anthony, they pass on that, then it's their fault if they don't win.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. So speaking of Carlos Boozer, do you think he's going to be amnestied, or do you think he could end up being somewhere via a trade or anything?
I would think amnesty. The contract's just too big. I think there's a place for Carlos Boozer in the NBA. I think there are teams that would want him. I mean, he can still score a little bit. I mean, he's a big body. You know, he's not a guy who Tom Thibodeau likes in the fourth quarter, so I don't think there's any place for him on the Bulls next year. I think they're going to restructure some things, but I would think it would have to be amnesty just because I don't think anybody's going to take him, and I don't think they want any bad contract back in return. I would think ideally they'd be trying to clear money out, so my best guess there would be amnesty.
What is your take on the Boozer era here in Chicago, Jason?
The thing I'll always remember about the Carlos Boozer era is he was the guy when they couldn't get LeBron, they couldn't get Dwayne Wade, they couldn't get any of the big free agents, and in the summer they signed him. They felt they needed to make a splash, and they threw a lot of money at Carlos Boozer, and they overpaid for him. He's not a terrible player. I mean, by no means is he, but they got the guy that if you watch a lot of NBA like I do over the years, if you stay up and watch those late-night games on TNT, you watched Carlos Boozer play for the Jazz and disappear when they play the Lakers when the Lakers were good. I mean, he's an okay player, but he was not a player that was worth $14 or $15 million a season. And I think the Bulls felt some pressure there because they didn't get Wade and they didn't get LeBron and they didn't get one of the top guys. They overpaid for a second-tier guy, and Carlos Boozer pretty much was the same guy in Utah that he was here. He just wasn't as good as people thought he was, but if you watch those Utah Jazz games over the years, you shouldn't expect him to be because he's not that type of player.
Why did Bulls fans think that Boozer was going to come here and just take over? I mean, I'm a Laker fan as well, and Pau Gasol, every playoff game, would crush Boozer. Wasn't it crazy that fans thought he was going to come here and just take over?
Yeah, but that's the thing with fans, though, sometimes, fellas. I mean, look, the organization talks up a guy, and then everybody gets, the rose-colored glasses on. And the Bulls organization, look, they've done a lot of good things, but they've made some key mistakes over the years. I mean, we heard the same stuff when they had Ben Gordon and Luol Deng that, you can't part with this great young talent for Kevin Garnett. You can't part with this great young talent for Paul Gasol. Really? You can't? They do a very good job, I mean, the fans and the organization to a certain extent, in overvaluing their own young players. I mean, there's good young players like Taj Gibson, and then there's superstars like Carmelo Anthony. And if you can get both on your team, that's great. But sometimes to get the superstar, you got to get rid of the pretty good young player, and I hope that's what they do in this case. But I think your question about it's just fans, trying to be positive and looking at some numbers in the stat sheet, and the stat sheets don't always tell you the story about the player.
Now, let's move on to the Blackhawks as they have a huge game tonight. They're going to open up Game 1 of the second round against the Minnesota Wild. How do you see this game starting to play out tonight?
Boy, I think the Hawks fellas got a favorable matchup when they played Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota just does not score very well. And more importantly, their goaltending's a mess. I mean, you look at both their goaltenders, and it's really a big question mark. I think this series, you never want to say it's in the bag, and I'm not going to do that. But I think the Hawks faced a much more formidable opponent in round one against St. Louis than they do here in round two. Minnesota might come out with some, Minnesota could very easily, I would say this series goes 6 games. They probably win 2 games. I mean, they're an improved team. They're not as good as the Hawks, but they're better than they were last year. And tonight, it wouldn't surprise me if actually Minnesota took the lead early in this game. I mean, they're coming off a lot of momentum there with that overtime win in Colorado. The Hawks haven't played a few days. It wouldn't surprise me if they played a very good first period, now played the Hawks. But, I expect to win the Blackhawks to win this series. Their skaters are better, and their goalie's better, too. If you're Minnesota, what you needed to win a series like this would have maybe an elite goaltender, like a Pekka Rinne in Nashville, where maybe the skaters aren't as good as the Hawks, but the goalie can neutralize the game. Minnesota just doesn't have that guy on the roster.
What are some Blackhawk guys that you want to see just take over against the Wild? Maybe some guys that didn't show up in the first round.
Well, it's hard to really get on guys in a 7-game series, the first one, But, I mean, Patrick Sharp was pretty quiet in the first, those 6 games against the Blues. I mean, Marian Hossa did a lot of things well, but he wasn't able to score very much or, get many points on his stat sheet. So maybe you'd like to see those guys find the back of the net or be involved. But overall, I think for me, you hear people say, for example, I took a lot of questions on the radio after the Game 2 loss, and we had people calling in on the game saying, they got to play Jeremy Morin. Really? If Jeremy Morin is the guy to save your season when Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews and Patrick Sharp and Marian Hossa and the rest of these guys are on your roster, well, then your season's already over. So, really, the guys who've contributed over the years are the guys who are going to have to contribute, and I just hope their penalty killing stays as good as it's been. It was great against St. Louis. That's a very underrated part of postseason hockey. Everybody talks power play, but you kill off penalties well, that's a big thing for them, too. But I would expect the big guns to perform. That's what they need.
And who are some of the Wild guys that the Hawks should be aware of?
Well, they've got talented guys. I mean, Mikko Koivu is a guy who wins a lot of faceoffs. I think he wins like 65% of his faceoffs, so that's always a concern. Yeah. I mean, Zach Parise, Suter's a very good player. They've got some guys who, they've got named guys. This isn't a no-name team, but what I think where they, again, are severely compromised against the Hawks is number one goaltending and number two, the depth of their lines. Everybody talks about the Hawks roll the four lines out there, and they can put 6 to 8 defensemen out there that, you really have to reckon with. The Wild don't have that. Yeah, they're going to be great when Koivu's out there, Parisi's out there, but it's the rest of those guys that you have to wonder, their third and fourth lines where the Hawks really have an advantage.
What would need to happen for the Blackhawks to lose this series in a bad way? Like, what bad thing would have to happen?
Well, the goaltending for Minnesota would have to all of a sudden get really good. I don't see it happening, but it would have to. I mean, they'd have to step up in goal. The Blackhawks would have to probably take a lot of bad penalties. Their penalty kill would have to really go downhill, I would say. And with the goaltending for Minnesota improving, the Hawks would get frustrated offensively, and they wouldn't be able to score, and it would be a snowball effect. So Minnesota will do one thing. They will do. They don't hit like St. Louis. I mean, St. Louis, everybody knows they hit you, and they hit as hard as anybody in the league and harder than the Hawks. But Minnesota will mud up the neutral zone. They'll try and, that's more their game. They're not going to hit, but they're going to try and clog the passing lanes. They're going to try and, play keep away if they can with the puck. They're going to try and do things to make sure the Hawks can't get their puck possession game going. So if they can do those things well, get good goaltending, and, score some power play goals, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs. They've got a shot. This is not a horrible team. I just don't see that translating for them to win a 7-game series. But again, you never say never.
Now, real quick, let's talk about the Bears, as they're going to be drafting with the 14th pick. Who do you think they're going to take?
That's a good question, guys. I don't know. I mean, it's so hard because you're at 14 and, we're all playing the prediction game at this point. I would think they're either going to go defensive tackle or safety. I would go safety because they need defensive tackles as much as safeties, but I think they've had such a problem with the safety position for so long, and there's no answer on their roster. I mean, if Clinton Dix is there, they might take him. If Pryor's there from Louisville, I think he'd be a good pick. A lot of people have him moving up the draft board. I don't think Aaron Donald's going to be there at 14. I really don't. So if they go defensive line, you might see someone like Timmy Jernigan get picked. I mean, the defensive tackle from Florida State. Mm-hmm. I think he's certainly a candidate. But if I had to say 3 guys, I'd say look at Clinton Dix, look at Pryor, and probably look at Jernigan, just because I think they want Aaron Donald, but I don't think they're trading up to get him, and I don't think he's going to be on the board at the time.
Jason, where can people hear your show on the radio?
Well, make sure you tune in tomorrow. Jason McKee and I will be on from, we're going to shorten show tomorrow, 2 to 4 on the game, 87.7 FM. Okay. And that's because they got Kentucky Derby coverage on it. We're not on Sunday this week because the Hawks will be on the game. But we're regularly on, Jason McKee and I, from 2 to 5 p.m., of course, right here in Chicago on 87.7 FM, the game. And then I'm on Saturday and Sunday mornings on Yahoo Sports Radio. On Saturdays, I'm on from 10 to noon, and also on Sundays from 8 to noon, and you can catch that. We don't have an affiliate, unfortunately, here in Chicago, but you can catch me on the internet, yahoosportsradio.com.
Okay, Jason, sounds good, and have a good weekend, and here's to hoping the Hawks get a win.
Yeah, let's hope so, fellas. Have a great weekend,
right,
great rest
too,
of your
Jason.
Thanks.
Thanks, man. And that was Jason Goch. Check him out tomorrow on 87.7 The Game, as he will be on with Jason McKee with their weekend show, and then he is on Yahoo Sports Radio Saturday and Sundays, 10 till 12 noon, so 10 a.m. to 12 noon, and you can listen online and on the Yahoo Sports Radio app. We're going to come back and break down everything Jason Goch said. And up next at 4:30, my guy, one of my radio mentors, Gravy from How 105.3 FM up in Grand Rapids, the host of the Gravy and Rachel in the Morning Show. He's our White Sox analyst, and he will be coming on to Friday Sports Riot to break down the White Sox after this on SportsTownChicago.com.
The Friday Sports Riot on SportsTownChicago.com.